reported at level 6 that they refer to as the Hall of Horrors, which is their most advanced genetics research, where they have actually manipulated human genes with other species, including primates and lower mammals, and there's some speculation that they have actually altered human DNA so that they could increase the intelligence of human beings to the 200 to 300 IQ range, and also involved in life extension. So that gives you an idea, again, of how far advanced this technology is. Los Alamos and Sandia are located more in the central part. This is close to Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's very well known, very well funded research and development facility. And the significant thing about Los Alamos to me personally is I've been following a gentleman by the name of Colonel John Alexander. Now, John Alexander has a very interesting history. He got his fame, or received his fame, by coming up with an idea called non-lethal weapons. You know, it used to be the idea that what you did to your enemy to get him to submit to your will is you blew him up. You destroyed him, his infrastructure, everything else. And then the idea came along, for example, with the neutron bomb, that what you would do is you would just destroy the people and leave the infrastructure. Now the idea is to keep the people but control the people, just control their minds. And this is what he was into. He was into what's called non-lethal weapons, and some examples would be like acoustic weapons, microwave weapons, that they would actually beam them at your head and heat your brain and you'd start hallucinating. All different types of chemicals, biologicals. My suspicion is that during the Branch Davidian siege that there were psychotronic and non-lethal weapons used. And the reason I say this is because there was an individual that the FBI contacted from the Moscow Institute of Psychocorrections. This was a Russian scientist by the name of Igor Smirnov. And they were trying to find ways to bring David Koresh out. And Igor Smirnov recommended the use of psychotronics. In other words, sending thoughts into his head. This is known as synthetic telepathy. Sending thoughts into his head so that he thought he was hearing a voice from God. Now, interestingly enough, a very similar thing happened during the siege in Jordan, Montana. When Bo Gritz went to visit the Freemen, they said the only way that they would come out is if they got a message, a direct message from Yahweh. Right after that, 3 truckloads came in full of generators. They said that they were generators. The idea was that they were going to cut the power to the Freeman Ranch, and they said they needed these generators to power the rest of the ranches around the area. Well, they knew that the Freemen had their own generators, so that didn't make any sense. That really didn't pass the smell test, as they say. Well, what happened was they started these generators up, and again, they were on these semi-trucks, and the trucks were all painted black. At the very same time, they began to pull all the media back, and all the ATF, not the ATF, yes, the ATF and FBI agents that were on the ground. They pulled all these people back. The only people that they would let into the perimeter of the ranch there were individuals who were in these armored personnel carriers that were borrowed from Montana from the missile silos that were protected against electromagnetic radiation. And all they did was they took these vehicles and they painted FBI on the side, but they were actually Department of Defense vehicles that were impervious to what they called electromagnetic pulse and electromagnetic radiation. So again, my suspicion is they basically used these weapons, these psychotronic weapons, to anesthetize the Freemen, and that's how they got them out. But anyway, John Alexander is also a member of a group called the Aviary. Now, those who purchased the Encounter Chronicles book, you're going to find that probably the most fascinating part of the book, because we found out about 4 years ago that there is a group of people in the United States that we refer to as the Aviary, that control all information regarding UFOs, information regarding the acquisition of information, the dissemination, the analysis. And these people are individuals who have positions in places like General Motors, Biomedical Research Division of General Motors. They have positions in academia. They have positions in the military, especially in intelligence. My guess is that this is the actual, what used to be called MJ-12 or Majestic 12. Now, Majestic 12 was an alleged group of 12 people who back in the 50s controlled all the information regarding UFOs under Truman. And there was a set of documents called the MJ-12 papers. Now, several investigators analyzed these papers, and they were about split as to whether they were legitimate or they were a hoax. So the jury was still out. My personal belief, after looking at the papers, is they were a hoax. However, the aviary is real. And the aviary, I believe, was predicated upon the concepts of MJ-12. And some of the names of the aviary, and the reason they call them the aviary is they all go by bird names. For example, penguin, owl, raven, hawk, chickadee, and we've so far identified about 12 of these individuals, and all of them have very interesting histories. Most of them, again, have been tied to military intelligence and also involved extensively in occult practices. Brookhaven National Laboratories. It's not on the map. It's up in Long Island. The interesting thing about Brookhaven is that recently a story broke involving a gentleman by the name of John Ford. Now, this is not a household name, but John Ford was the head of a group called the Long Island UFO Network. And about 2 years ago, there allegedly was a crash of something in Brookhaven Park, in actually Suffolk County Park. And John Ford and the rest of the Long Island UFO Network went out to investigate this. And what they found was that there was high degrees of radiation. There were a number of trees that died. There was evidence that something had happened there. Well, they approached several individuals that were on the city council, the safety commissioner for Suffolk County, and they denied that anything had happened, even though there was a tremendous amount of evidence, even including the yellow police tape that they put around crime scenes. They found that there. Well, Mr. Ford kept pressing the issue, and eventually what happened was he was indicted for conspiracy to kill or assassinate these 3 county officials by planting radiation on them. We believe that this thing was a complete frame-up, and to this day we do not know what has happened to John Ford. We haven't heard anything from him. But allegedly whatever this was probably came from Brookhaven. Lawrence Livermore, not much is known about Lawrence Livermore. It's very similar to Oak Ridge. They do a lot of studies in high-energy physics and nuclear research. Stanford Research Institute out in California is very interesting in that a gentleman by the name of Hal Puthoff, and I'm very surprised that he even posed for this photograph. This was off a television show produced by BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, called The Psi-Files, The Real X-Files. And it says here, Hal Puthoff, head of remote viewing program, Stanford Research Institute, 1972 through 1985. Now, remote viewing is just the national securities establishment's name for clairvoyancy. They've used this technique for a number of years to locate enemy submarines, biological weapons facilities, chemical weapons facilities. They've even used it to find, for example, Admiral Dozier, who was kidnapped a few years ago. They used this remote viewing technique to try to locate him. Now, what's interesting about the remote viewing is there's a number of people who participated in this program called Stargate. And many of you have probably seen the movie Stargate. Well, Stargate, the movie, was named after Stargate